The Particular Abilities of Marinette and Her Discovery of Them by Plants Are Fun 06, a Miraculous Ladybug and Batman crossover fanfic. Marinette, pronounced Marinette, name meaning failure, nuisance, waste of space, insurance. Or at least that's what her name meant to most being her mother and grandfather. Her life, or rather sex, was not exactly what either of them wanted. They wanted an heir with strong blood. They wanted a male. Marinette knew that something was inherently wrong with her, something that despite her great efforts she could not control. But it was a bit sad in a way, how at 3 years old, Marinette was scorned upon by nearly everyone she knew. Despite this, at 3 years old, Marinette knew many things. She knew the theory behind most martial arts, very little physical practice. Most physical training started at the age of 5. She knew the best way to get information was to keep quiet and spy on the maids. Most everyone completely ignored the existence of handmaids. To the higher-ups of the league, they were not even acknowledged above an order. They were often forgotten. Because of this, many spoke things in front of handmaids and servants that would be better kept secret. It didn't help that the servants loved to gossip, and what she knew, better than anyone, was that she was worthless. Or at least, worthless to Marinette al Ghul. Despite being his blood, and the blood of some man he'd hoped to be his heir, she was not treated as such. The man who fathered her was apparently a powerful man, her grandfather thought highly of, and upon declining such an offer to be his heir, decided that he would have his child. Talia getting pregnant with his child for an heir would be the best option in his eyes. And it was surprisingly easy. Within 3 months, Talia had announced her pregnancy to Ra, and the high-ranking generals of the League, Rafe, had never been more pleased. His plan was going perfectly. They had gone through all the traditional and ceremonial procedures that had been followed by any women who were pregnant and part of the League, one of which being a natural birth, and a blind pregnancy. Blind pregnancy meaning not using any form of technology to observe the baby before the due date. When Marinette learned that her mother's pregnancy was blind, she knew that was the only reason she even existed, and thanked every single weird old person and their strange tradition and ceremonies that it was this way. She saw the way Roz looked at her, lips always curled down and eyebrows always furrowed in disgust, and he wasn't subtle with his thoughts of Marinette either. He regularly berated her, publicly, on any and all mistakes she made, everything from doing a stance incorrectly to not getting sufficiently perfect marks on her arithmetic test. She felt the scorn of his voice when he would yell at her for disrespecting him when she looked in his eyes, or looked at the ground while speaking to him, or not arriving at certain places in time due to her tutors holding her longer than designated, or ignoring her tutors and leaving when the official period ends. She couldn't do anything right. She physically couldn't do anything right. It was constant, it was unforgiving. She knew that had her mother's pregnancy not been blind, had they done an ultrasound and seen her gender, Ra would have ordered an abortion on the spot. She also knew that grandfather was very tempted to kill her, regardless of her status as living, breathing, and actively conscious human being. In addition to the old people and their weird traditions, Marinette also thanked all of her grandfather's associates. While they were labeled supervillains, and rightfully so, they did frown upon killing one's own blood. And Ra couldn't simply kill her, and because some were present at her birth and were aware of her existence, she, again, thanked every weird old person and their strange traditions that ensured she lived past the right old age of 1 day. So Marinette simply existed for one purpose: insurance. She didn't know who her father was. That was a strictly kept secret that only a few higher-ups, general, and close allies knew. She certainly didn't, because what child needed to know who their father was? In all honesty, she really didn't think about who her father was too often. Only when her grandfather would curse her existence because You are given great opportunity. Your blood of 2 powerful lines, and you still fail at the simplest of tasks." She dropped a 5-pound katana they placed in her hand. She was 2, so she would wonder who the second bloodline was. She kind of got the idea that her father was probably Caucasian. She had a lot of features that resembled that of a Caucasian child. Then again, her father could be of mixed race, considering her mother was Chinese Arab. And she had many leaning Chinese features, and very few Arab at all. So maybe, like mother, he was mixed race, and she just ended up getting nearly exclusive Caucasian features. And apparently, whoever her father was didn't stay with the League, because he didn't like her grandfather. Good judgment. Marinette didn't really like her grandfather either. He was mean. But apparently, grandfather and mother's all else has failed plan was for them to use her to manipulate her father. So yes, insurance. A pawn in her mother and grandfather's game of chess. So Marinette just spent her life as any of the League's high-ranking members' children would, constantly training and educating. From 5 in the morning to 9 at night, it was an incredibly detailed schedule, one she abided by every day, no breaks. Attending basic survival theory and espionage classes, her foreign language lessons, those were her favorite, her basic acrobatics classes, her second favorite class, she liked to do cartwheels, her academics, and her basic martial arts classes. The martial arts classes were mostly just stances and the theory behind it all, and maybe a few punches. The League had a running theme. Rather than teaching a person a particular thing, whether it be math, acrobatics, or martial arts, a person would be taught them the theory of it and have them understand what it was. Then they would build onto that. Effective in teaching those who did understand, and those who don't ended up in the fire that burnt all the bodies at the end of the month. It was Marinette's least favorite day because she was forced to watch it, and it always stunk really bad. She never complained, though. Her mother would always stand there, too. She didn't really see her mother often. She didn't think her mother liked her. And her mother would stand stock straight with her hands folded together in front of her, staring at the fire. Marinette didn't even think her mother blinked. Even when the fire would flash really close and make her face go hot, Mother wouldn't even flinch. She was kinda scary. And so, when her mother would stand stock straight, eyes unmoving on the flames, Marinette would too. She would stand there, stock still, even when the fire would flash up really close to her and burn her face. She would tense up and make herself stand really still, just like Mother. Marinette was really happy, practically bouncing as she walked to the south wing of Nendam Part for her mathematics class. She had just finished with her foreign language professor and had been able to read Mandarin book out loud in English, with perfect accuracy without stuttering once. Marinette was really proud of herself. After finishing English, the professor said that they would be moving on to French. French! She loved the way the French would pronounce their vowels, how they would roll their tongue wet. She was immediately snapped out of her thoughts when 2 large arms wrapped around herself and secured her arms down by her side. Before she could kick the person, or swerve around to see who had grabbed her, or scream, she felt it. Heat. Across her eyes, her face, hot, 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 and then she felt it, the most agonizing pain she had ever experienced. Her face felt like it was melting. This wasn't like the fire, where it would burst out in little bouts and lick her face. It felt as if someone was taking her face and forcing it into the fire, and now she screamed. The weight holding her arms down disappeared, and she immediately raised her hands to her face to claw at her eyes where she had felt the heat and the pain. Her mind was screaming at her a multitude of things. She couldn't decipher any of them past the pain. She couldn't think of anything past the pain. Her screaming continued, and the involuntary clawing never ceased, even when she had felt a hand press onto her back, and more grabbing at her wrists. Had she been in the right state of mind, she would have realized that the hands were small and frail. She would have been able to figure out that these were most likely handmaids, or some sort of servant, and not attempted to kick them away from her, while she continued to paw at herself. She felt 2 arms wrap around her again and force her arms down. She only fought harder, only kicked more violently, only screeched louder, only clawed more viciously. And in doing so, she completely missed the small pinch in her thigh, only registered her muscles slowly getting heavier, and the slow progression of it getting harder to fight, and her voice becoming more and more sluggish by the moment, until eventually her thoughts slowed and eventually ceased, and she fell unconscious.